a production of the New Jersey courts.
Thank you. Thank you, Judge Selsey, honorable judges, friends, honorees. My story begins just over 3 years ago, in October of 2016. Most of you were probably just starting out your career in law school at that time. You're puzzling over contracts and torts and civil procedure, wondering if you would ever be sitting in those seats right now. I practiced in a 3-lawyer firm in Lawrenceville. It's in Mercer County. I lived there with my wife, Laurel. She's a geologist at Princeton. Our girls, Emily and Molly, were out of the house and they were starting their own careers. I enjoyed the practice of law. When people asked me what I did, I always joked. I said, politics, religion, and sports, nothing controversial. By that I meant I was the attorney for local governments, townships in Mercer County. That was the politics. I was the general counsel for the New Jersey State Interscholastic Athletic Association. That was the sports. And I was special counsel for the Diocese of Trenton. That was the religion. I found the work challenging, rewarding, and endlessly interesting. In my spare time, I rode my bike. I'd always been a competitive runner or rider, but once the girls got older, I rode more and more. I raced. During the racing season, I raced most weekends, sometimes twice, all over New Jersey and in other states. Cycling was competitive, it was social, and it kept me healthy, until it didn't. October 15th, 2016 was a Saturday. The day before, Friday, was a motion day, and I'd argued a case in Burlington County. I was ready for the weekend. My wife, Laurel, the geologist, was leading a field trip in central Pennsylvania. I got up early, and I drove down to Marlton, about 30 minutes from me, where I met with my team for our weekly training ride. We met at the Whole Foods at 73 and Green Tree Road. We left at 8 o'clock sharp. We headed out towards Vincenttown and on towards Tabernacle, picking up riders along the way. Before long, there were about 20 of us. We were riding in a rotating, rhythmic pace line. Now, when you ride in a group like that, you ride fast. You ride in a tight formation. You're always rotating through the pace line so that someone new is in the front breaking the wind. Everyone who was there that day was a pro. We all knew what we were doing. Although there's no room for error, we'd done it thousands of times before. We knew the roads, we knew the route, and we trusted each other. After Tabernacle, the ride got faster. We were pushing about 30 miles an hour when word came back from the front of the line that there was traffic ahead. They were slowing. The word didn't get to the back of the line fast enough, though. So the people in the back kept riding fast as the ones in the front slowed down. And in an instant, there wasn't enough room on the road for all of us. We touched wheels, and I went down. I landed awkwardly on my head, and then I went numb. I stayed conscious the whole time. Now, there's a woman on the ride named Robin. She was a paramedic. She rode in ambulances for a living. She took charge. She talked to me. She stabilized me. She threatened bodily harm to the people who wanted to move me off the road. And she arranged for a helicopter to airlift me to Cooper. Without her, I might not be here today. But I am here, talking to you, sharing your proud moment. How did that happen? Why did that happen? I don't know, and I don't think I'll ever know. What I can tell you, though, is the experience that I went through, and I can share with you my story. I'd broken my neck at about the C5 level. That left me a quadriplegic. I was paralyzed from the chest down. I couldn't move my hands. For some unknown reason, I could move my biceps and my triceps. That gave me something to work with. In all, I was in the hospital almost 6 months. 2 weeks in intensive care at Cooper, and then I went over to Philadelphia, where I was at McGee Rehabilitation Hospital for the rest of the time. I lost about 30 pounds off my already skinny frame. In pictures, you can see that my eyes were sunken, my cheeks were hollow. I had a hard plastic cervical collar wrapped around my neck and had tubes and IVs sticking all over me. Nobody told me I looked like death, but I did. Instead, they said positive things, encouraging things like, hey, it looks like you've gained weight, or your voice is louder today, or hey, you're sitting up now. But it was tough. I had a tracheostomy to keep my airway clear. I had a half dozen more surgeries for secondary problems that arose. I had lost my ability to swallow. That meant I couldn't eat, and I had a hard time talking. I was trying to survive, minute to minute, hour to hour, day to day. I could not imagine life outside the hospital, where I had an army of nurses and doctors and aides and therapists taking care of me. Living at home, returning to work, were beyond my imagination. Laurel was by my side throughout, and one day she read me an article from the New York Times. It was about recovery from spinal cord injuries. It said, recovery is not a marathon, it's an ultramarathon. So for those of you who don't know, ultramarathons are 50 and 100-mile races. Now, as a former runner, I understood what that kind of challenge meant. An ultramarathon is agonizingly long and inconceivably difficult. But if you understand that challenge and you take one step at a time, you will eventually finish. There will be an end. So one day at the hospital, a cycling friend of mine was visiting. His name was Chris. He came by to chat, and he said something that stuck. He said, we all have to adapt. Now, that was powerful coming from him. He owned a small business. He had to constantly adapt to changing times, changing market conditions. He knew what he was talking about. Another day, an old lawyer friend, Ted, the guy who I shared an office with in my first job at the prosecutor's office when I was your age, he came in. He said, everyone's pulling for you, you know. And then he tapped his hand on his head, and he said, you're a lawyer. You can still use your brain. And throughout all of that time, I was getting cards and letters and emails and visitors. The cycling community, the legal community, faith communities, friends from now, friends from my distant past, family. Their well wishes, prayers, memories, and support wove a net that kept me from falling too far. One of the letters stayed with me. It was from a client named Mary, whose opinion I really respected. She said, we need you back. Now, that was a real shock to me, that even in my condition, I was valued. On a lighter note, another client came by one day. She was the administrator of a zoning board I'd represented for years. I was sitting up in a wheelchair, like this one. I had a suction wand strapped to my hand to help clear what I couldn't swallow. It sounded like the dentist's office. She said, we want you back at our meetings, you know. And I said, even with this suction? And she said, only if you turn it on when the other attorney's talking. Goodness knows, being a lawyer is hard work. We see people when they need help. We deal with conflict. We have to deliver hard truths. But that's also why it's rewarding. As lawyers, good lawyers, we know we have a duty to something larger than ourselves. You just now took an oath to bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution. To the Constitution, to an idea that binds us together. You said a pledge. You said that you would act less for yourself than for justice and the people. You've pledged to be a champion for fairness and due process. At some point in my recovery, I realized I did not want to give that up. Was there a way I could adapt, like my friend Chris had suggested? Was there a way I could find to keep using my brain, like my lawyer friend Ted said, even though I was completely dependent on others now for all my needs? Did I still have the tools to help clients, like Mary, when the packaging that came in was now so very different? Progress was slow, but it came. One day in the hospital, my occupational therapist brought me a stylus like this. She showed me how to use it with my iPad. She said, pretty soon you'll be putting that on with ninja speed. And with the stylus and the tablet, my world opened up. My speech therapist started coming in early to help clear my airways so we could have productive sessions, so that I could actually talk at a time like this. My partners and I merged our small firm into Parker McKay, which meant we could stay afloat and keep working with the clients. And knowing the risk the firm took on me, because at that time I was in the hospital with minimal hope of ever returning to practice, that boosted my own confidence. And my mind began to wake up. I started interacting with clients, first in the hospital, and then when I got out in April of 2017 on my back porch at home. I weaned myself off that noisy suction machine and made my first public appearance in September at a meeting of the Athletic Association's Executive Committee. In November, a judge asked me to rejoin her on a CLE panel we had done in the past. And I said, seriously? I can barely talk. But again, her confidence in me gave me confidence in myself. And I did it. A real milestone came when my ear, nose, and throat doctor said, I haven't given up on your swallow. He sent me for 4 months of intensive therapy. And over a year after my accident, I swallowed some soup and then some wine. 6 months after that, in May 2018, we decided to take a chance and pull the feeding tube. And then I was on my own. Of course, nothing happens without my wife. Every day, Laurel transforms herself from a geologist to a nurse to a caregiver and back again. She keeps me going, somehow does her own work as well. She even tied my tie for me a couple hours ago. My story is different without her. And my race is still being run. Every few months brings something new. 3 months ago, I got a lightweight manual wheelchair and started moving myself around with those biceps and triceps that I was so lucky to have. In September, I flew on an airplane. No one thing turned the tide. It was the accumulation of little things, the little steps in that ultra marathon that added up. McGee, the rehab hospital, where I spent all that time, has a slogan. It's believe. Believe in a way back. It's everywhere. It's on every poster, on every wall. It's even their Wi-Fi password. And for a long time, I thought that slogan applied to somebody else, not me. It applied to people who would learn to walk again, or people who could use their hands, or people who could swallow and eat food. But I came to understand over time that there would be a way back for me. I could adapt. I could use my brain. I could keep helping others. My life was unalterably changed, but it would still be a good life. So where am I now? Well, my day begins at 7 o'clock in the morning when a nurse or an aide gets me out of bed with a lift and settles me in my wheelchair. Someone drives me to work in our converted van. 3 days a week, it's my friend Dan, who's a retired lawyer. When Laurel goes out into the field, which as a geologist, she does as much as she can, other people, like my daughter, my brother-in-law, my college roommate, they come to take care of me. Where before I was independent, now I depend on others. I depend on the relationships that I built over time. Professionally, I do what I did before. I go to court, I write briefs, hold hearings, attend public meetings. But now I don't do it alone. I've got colleagues who help. My clients stuck with me. Those relationships held. My next goal is to get back on a computer. I'm trying out a new adaptive mouse to see if that can help. So that's what I lived through. That's my story. That's what brought me here before you. But before we end, I want to talk about one more thing. It's a poem. First, I'll give you an explanation. The State Bar Foundation has a wonderful program called the Mock Trial Program. I encourage you to get involved if you ever have the time. There's no greater fun than going back to a high school and teaching kids how to overcome their fear of public speaking or how to think like a lawyer. I coached the Lawrence High School mock trial team for 19 years. And one of the things I did to push the kids out of their comfort zone, which as good lawyers you're going to have to do for yourselves, was to have them read poetry from the balcony of the high school library. One of the poems was Ulysses. It's about the man who fought the Trojan War. He survived his 10-year odyssey to get back home. And in this poem, he's now an old man. He's lived life fully. He's had his adventures, but he dreams of keeping those adventures going even though he is old, even though his body is now weak and diminished. I liked having the kids read it because of its inspiring ending. But now I realize that the poem speaks more to me now than it ever did to them. Because it says that even when the body goes, the spirit remains. Here are the last 6 lines. Though much is taken, much abides. And though we are now that strength which in old days moved earth and heaven, that which we are. Heroic hearts made weak by time and fate, but strong in will, to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield. So now, as you begin your careers in the legal profession, be prepared to adapt when life throws you its inevitable curveball. You won't be challenged the way I have, but you will be challenged. Adapt and grow. Recognize that your capital's up here in your brain, and that it grows as you gain experience, gather knowledge, and foster relationships. Understand that your experience, your knowledge, and your relationships can never be taken away from you. Strive to do justice and to help your clients, because whether you know it or not, you have the tools to help them, and they need you. And run your own race, step by step, understanding that even when we are made weak by time and fate, we can still strive, still seek, still find, and not yield. Good luck to you all. Welcome to the profession, and congratulations.